got the live stream over here and it wasn't coming through, and I realized my mistake, so we're good.
Okay. Hello everybody, my name's Annie Parker and I'm going to be your host for today's Reactor Live event. We're beaming me in from sunny Sydney over here in Australia, and I'm joined in this fabulous live stream all about social entrepreneurship by a good friend and colleague of mine, Shalu Garg. Before we go into some of our hints and tips and some of the themes and trends that we're seeing in that social entrepreneurship space, I just want to take a few minutes to introduce ourselves and let you know a little bit more about us. My name is Annie Parker and I'm part of the global Microsoft for Startups team, and I lead the startup engagement team, which basically is all about creating tools and helpful things to be able to help founders build and grow their startups. I've been in the startup space for a little bit over 10 years now, and over that period of time, I've seen so many different ways of founders succeeding in this space. And in parallel, I've also built a couple of my own nonprofits, which have specifically focused on that social entrepreneurship side of things. So one of them was called Code Club Australia. It's still going strong. I'm really proud to say, and over about the last 6 years or so, we've been going into schools all across Australia and helping kids learn the basics of coding, because we know that having those digital skills are super important for their future. And over that 5 or 6 years we've been up and running, we've now helped well over 165,000 kids around the country to learn the basics of coding, which is really, really cool and in and of itself. But one of the other stats within that is the majority of the children that get that help are in low socioeconomic areas or rural parts of Australia, which otherwise wouldn't be able to get those skills. So really proud of that. And then another non-profit we created a few years ago was called Techfugees Australia, and that was around helping newly arrived refugees and migrants to Australia to help them understand how they can use technology to further their businesses, their careers, their pathways, and of course help them to land safely and well in their new communities. So that's a little bit about me. Shalu, do you want to introduce yourself to the folks on the stream?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Annie, for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Shaloo Garg, and I am based in San Francisco. It's a beautiful day here, except that we are all quarantined, I guess, going into week 4. And I really hope everyone is doing well and is staying healthy there. Thank you for joining us. Quick introduction of my role here at Microsoft, and then I'll give you a little bit about my background as well. At Microsoft, I lead the Global Social Entrepreneurship Program, something that we just kicked literally about 9 weeks ago. We're very fortunate to have some senior leaders who are extremely passionate about this space. Annie and I will get to that in just a minute. And besides that, of course, just overseeing the ecosystem here in Silicon Valley, it's the hub of where the innovation comes from. So we're constantly watching the market and engaging with entrepreneurs here. A little bit about my background. I always sort of split that on the professional side and the personal side. So professionally, I've spent many years at another corporate, Oracle, for just overseeing the mergers and acquisitions business, go-to-market strategy for the cloud business. And then my last gig there was I was leading the global corporate innovation practice there, which is primarily commercializing revenue opportunities for startups, connecting them into Fortune 500 enterprise customers. So that's, thoroughly enjoyed my stay there. On a more personal / passionate area, I would say I am extremely passionate about EdTech, and to that, I am a champion of innovation at United Nations. I've pledged in a General Assembly to push the agenda of technology in every conservative format that we have out there. So just to give you an example, anytime I would say the word school, the most natural reaction that comes out is school is a building, there are teachers within a building, there are kids there are notebooks and textbooks. But what we are trying to do is really challenge that thought process and say, for kids around the world who do not have access to schools, how can we bring education to their homes? So I've been doing that for the last 5 years and have thoroughly enjoyed the journey there. So really excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation, Annie.
Thanks, Shalu. And look, this is something that you and I have talked about a lot, right? The importance of, you know, why we get really excited and really passionate about non-profits or tech for good, or, you know, whatever the wrapper of description that you want to give around it. Why is it so personal to you, Shalu?
Yeah, you know, I will share a little bit about my sort of childhood. So my dad was an aeronautical engineer, and I actually was born in India, but I grew up in Middle East, and I literally went to like 11 different schools during my elementary, middle, and high school. And I was constantly moving from one area to another. So I was in Dubai, then I was in Iraq, I was in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. And I remember in sixth grade, I was in Syria. And literally, believe it or not, Annie, every time my day at the school would end, I would step out of the school and there were men with guns walking like left to right and right to left. And I was so used to it. It was like it wasn't normal for me. But what stuck with me for years was a very good friend of mine who was a neighbor of mine. I would always see that she would never go to school. Like her older brothers would go to school every morning in the same school bus that I did, but she never went to school. And I was sort of jealous. I was like, why do I have to do all the schooling and the studying and the testing? And she gets to have all the fun. But later I realized it was because of the community, the barriers in the community that did not allow young girls to go to school. And so it stuck with me. It bothered me for many, many years until I was doing my MBA and I took up this technology elective just for the fun, just for fun's sake. And that's where I realized, gosh, look at the power that technology has to change the world. And, you know, one thing led to another. I was previously just doing some volunteer work with Gates Foundation. And then that led me to my role at United Nations, a sort of a more formal role. And then when I joined Microsoft, Annie, I remember you and I having this conversation. We were like, we got to do something in the space. Like, we have tremendous potential and power as a technology company to make an impact, and let's just go and get it. So that's a bit about my personal story, Annie. I would love to hear yours as well.
Yeah, so mine is a little less you know, sort of stark. And look, I think that's one of the other reasons why this is so important to me. I may be a woman in technology, which does put me in a, you know, sort of a smaller group. However, I was born in the UK into, you know, a relatively well-off family. We have fantastic free education. We have a fabulous NHS. And, you know, as a result, it just meant that my start in life was and has been just phenomenally easy in comparison to lots and lots of other people around the world. And as I've been traveling around the world, you know, similar to your experience, Shalu, of different countries, and it's so quick and so easy to just see those gaps, those enormous barriers that people in other countries and other cultures around the world face. And the way that it sort of hits home for me is it's actually a friend of mine who sadly passed away a few months ago, called Leila Jana, founder of a fabulous company called Samasource. Her quote, and the one that I always use, is "Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not." And yep. That for me is something where, you know, to your point, Shalu, that technology can have such a wonderful way of solving that as an issue, i.e. letting those people who need the help and who have got these fabulous ideas, but technology can be a great leveler, and it can be a great way to make sure that as many wonderful thoughts and great talent around the world actually does get this opportunity to shine. And then the other way of flipping it is, I see the role that we have, certainly in our communities and certainly at Microsoft, as what a fabulous opportunity to use our platform and our influence for good. So for me, it's more a case of, as I've traveled around the world and as I've met fabulous founders in my different careers, both at Microsoft and previous, it feels like it's a moral obligation to me that, you know, we have to do something in this space, not just because it's the right thing to do, but just genuinely, I see such wonderful opportunity.
Absolutely. And Annie, just to add to that, I'll share with you an experience that I had in the Valley a few weeks ago. This was before COVID hit, and I was sitting on a panel and I got a question from one of the audience there saying, hey, I'm a founder of a startup, and to me, we're looking at CEO, founders, CFO, etc. She asked me, she said, how do you how would you describe your role at Microsoft, besides, of course, the fancy titles that we carry? And I told her, I said, we view ourselves as chief enabler officers, because all we are doing is enabling these businesses out there and really helping them be successful. So to your point, that's how we look at it, is we are fortunate to be in this position in terms of access to technology and resources. And let's really put that to good use and help entrepreneurs be successful.
Completely agree with you. And Shalu, you're going to run through just some trends that you're seeing in the industry and some other stats and really interesting things to share with everybody. But whilst you're getting your slides ready and going to share your screen, I just wanted to flag to everybody, don't forget that the Q&A channel is open. So if you have any questions for us as we go through, please do start posting them, and don't lose your train of thought, and we'll get to them towards the end of the live stream. So over to you, Shalu, to talk through some themes and other stats that you think are super interesting to share.
Absolutely. Can you see my slide, Annie? Just want to make sure.
Not yet. We're still on the reactor slide.
Okay. Well, I am sharing it. Hold on one second. Yep, I have it up. Can you see it now?
That's still not quite working. I think we have a backup plan though.
That's right. Give us a moment. I will jump to the backup.
Thanks,
Great,
Jack.
thank you. So while our Chief Technology Officer, Jack, is helping us figure things out, just to level set here, before we built the social entrepreneurship program, we did our due diligence actually going back to 2006. And we said, guys, let's look at what's out there in the landscape. We know that this market segment is usually underserved, but we all know that numbers speak for itself, right? So we sliced and diced the data in the market for, as I mentioned, going back to 2006 up until 2019, looking at every facet of the numbers that existed there, not only from a total addressable market size perspective, but some of the big motions that were already in the market there, and the opportunity, especially from a capital investment perspective, that existed for social entrepreneurs. So I'm just going to walk you through some numbers. Jack, first slide, please. This is the last one. Thank you. I'm just going to walk you through some numbers here, and these are just some very few data points for you. Happy to share even broader portfolio of numbers, but just to draw your attention to the first number, 2.10 billion. What is that? So in 2018, the total capital investment for social impact startups was about 2.9 billion. And we pulled up the same report by September 2019, and the number had already hit 2.10 billion. This number signified two things. Number one, there's capital investment going in the market, which means that there are VCs and private equity firms that are supporting this market segment, which was not the case, at least the numbers that we looked at going back to 2010, between 2010 to 2016. Number two, if there's capital going in the market, that means there are businesses that are coming up, which means there's deal flow in the market, which means there is tremendous opportunity out there for social entrepreneurs to strive, to succeed, because obviously they're getting the capital from somewhere. And so that was a positive sign for us. The second number that I have here is $6 billion. This is spent in pro bono consulting by United Nations, Bain Capital, World Health Organization, etc. And this is pure consulting, free of cost for social entrepreneurs, just to help them be successful. To draw your attention once again to this number, none of these are technology companies. As you know, United Nations, WHO, purely philanthropic in nature. Bain Capital is a VC, a well-known VC, of course, globally. None of them are technology companies, but still there was so much pro bono work that's going in the market. And the last number is 1.3 trillion. That is the new value of social technologies in the economy, which is completely untapped right now. Nobody is even like 10%. We are not even 10% close to that number. So let's take a back step. Now you will say, wow, I mean, there are billions and trillions on this slide. This segment must be rocking. I am really sorry to say this, but this is one of the most underserved market segments right now. And the number one reason for that is lack of access to technology. And that's where programs like Global Social Entrepreneurship from Microsoft come in, which is not just about providing access to technology, but also resources. I'm sure, you know, for those of you who are on the call here, if you're a founder or if you've had a startup experience, access to capital is always the number one concern that comes up. And we do factor that in, that yes, access to capital is super critical, but so is other aspects of the business, which is the resources, the access to customers, and I'll get to that in just a minute. And of course, access to broader networks, which not are just limited to capital, but mentors and coaches and sponsors, etc. So I'll pause here, Annie, and have you react or ask any questions.
I guess that is the significant kind of takeaway from this slide, isn't it? Of the numbers sound big, but actually when you add that to, you know, or you put it next to something like a category like fintech or manufacturing or retail, this is just a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I would say there's never been a better time to be a social entrepreneur, especially in the given times that we are in with COVID. Right? Most of the use cases that we see out there are all social impact, because ultimately, and I read a very interesting research study by McKinsey, which said that if we, in a typical mainstream business, we look at the valuation of the company, we look at the funding amount, like Series A, 27 million must be pretty darn good, right? But for social impact, it's all about the rippling effect that startup creates on our society, community, and economy. And sometimes it's hard to measure that number because the impact is so powerful, not only of that solution, but the impact it's creating in the economy and community in general.
Completely agree. Do you want to keep going with the slides?
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, Jack, I was waiting for, thank you. So just a sneak peek into the offering for startups. And I remember having an early discussion with Annie on this, in fact, is Annie, we got to do something that's unique for social entrepreneurs. Yes. Do we have, and this was going back literally a year ago when we were having this conversation, and we said, do we have the ability to onboard or to help social entrepreneurs? Absolutely. A year ago, we did. But are we giving the right level of support that a social entrepreneur needs? And the answer was no, right? Not everything that a social entrepreneur needs is what we were giving up until a year ago. So if I could have your attention, please, to the left of the slide, that is our current offering as mainstream Microsoft for Startups business, which is if you're part of our portfolio, you get access to technology like free Azure Cloud credits, GitHub, Microsoft Power Platform, etc. There are developer tools there, technical support, business enablement like go-to-market, sales enablement, etc. Some really cool stuff there. So that's standard for the universal population there. But for social entrepreneurs, we have specifically built a customized offering. So in addition to the tech intensity, as we call it, we will give access to customers. And these are customers who have a C-suite commitment on sustainability or social impact. So I'm not saying large enterprises, let's say like Baskin Robbins. No, I'm talking about customers who've gone vocal in public to say, yep, you know, we have committed to sustainability and social impact. We will also give access to NGOs, and that's one of the organizations that our Microsoft Philanthropies is very closely connected to, is how do we give these entrepreneurs access to these Fortune 500 customers as well as NGOs. So that's a big one, because obviously customer acquisition is always a big one for startups. Secondly, access to grants. Once again, how do we sort of bundle up the access to customers and tech intensity and sort of raise the bar for these startups? So grants are provided by Microsoft Philanthropies in the field of sustainability, skills and employability, and accessibility. Those are the three buckets that are open right now. And then the third bucket is community, right? I mean, we've been in this business long enough to understand that community is not about evening get-togethers with wine and cheese. It is for showing up for folks when they need you. It's showing up for your colleagues, for your peers, for your friends, for the entrepreneurs that you know when they need you. And so that's what we want to do, is build this community element into what we're doing here. And by that, there are a few things that we're trying to actually get out the door in the next few months. Is how do we interact directly with the entrepreneurs that are not part of our portfolio, but we still want to help, right? So they don't have to be part of the program, but they need guidance. Let's say, just to give you an example, a startup in Israel has their core market is New York City and Silicon Valley, but this social entrepreneur does not have access to, who do I call, who do I reach out to? Like, who's a key investor there? Or what are some of the startup trends that are out in the valley for social entrepreneurs? And so that is the kind of platform we are trying to build. Is you don't have to be part of our program, but yet you can get that knowledge. So the whole sense of community building right around there. Next slide, please, Jack. Thank you. So qualification criteria, this is the question I get quite a few times, like, what do I need to have, or what do I need to be part of this program? So if I could have your attention to the extreme left, that's our Microsoft for Startups specific criteria, which is anywhere from C to CVC stage. Obviously, we are super tight on B2B solutions, so solutions that have a direct alignment with business to business, less than 7 years in existence, and then less than $25 million in total revenue. But on the right side is what we have social impact specific criteria. And here what we look for is a business needs to have social impact as a key KPI. So it's not about, hey, I'm building a solution, a customized plan for chemotherapy patients, leveraging AI. Now, when you hear it, our emotional aspect of it comes, immediately, instantly, we feel that, gosh, this is social impact, versus a solution that will bring clean water in Uganda. I mean, if you compare both of them, the latter is more a social impact startup, because what they're doing is building a solution that is a key KPI for their business. And then secondly, an element of ethics and responsible AI. Microsoft as a company is really big on responsible AI. And so we want to make sure if there's any solution out there leveraging AI, it is ethical, it is responsible. And then I've just shared with you some of the areas that we look for in terms of social entrepreneurs. So EdTech, healthcare, sustainability, accessibility, like what have you, whatever. Every social entrepreneur is welcome to apply. So that's what I wanted to share, Annie. Any questions or thoughts from you, please?
So quick thing, if you do want to learn more and apply, there's a link on this screen right now, and we will share that again towards the end of the discussion too. I think one thing that I would say about the program that we've built here at Microsoft is to sort of re-emphasize Shalu's point on the importance of community. Where I've seen the biggest difference with, say, classic for-profit or more traditional for-profit tech companies versus social entrepreneurship companies, the biggest difference is the other hoops they have to go through are much harder, and they're not as well telegraphed and signposted, because as we've said, at the beginning of the live chat, this is a relatively small pool of people, companies, and resources. So it just means it's that much harder to try and find your next customer, or to try and find somebody else who's done something similar that can give you that mentorship and advice. So the reason why we've really overemphasized, if you like, the importance of the community is we just know that it may not be the easiest thing to find another 50 founders in your community, whether it be locally or nearby, that have done something similar to give you that, hey, I've done that lap around the block already, here's my advice on how to avoid the mistakes. So and then some of the other things that social enterprises face is that it's much more about working with really very, very, very old and traditional processes. So the speed of innovation and the ability to land your solution is oftentimes you're working with education departments or healthcare departments, which takes time. So you can't necessarily just spin up an application, whack it on an app store, and then, hey, presto, everybody's got it. It takes a lot more to kind of get the right approvals in place and really make sure that you've done the engagement with your customers. So we know it takes a little bit longer. So back to the scenario that I said earlier, we genuinely believe in our team at Microsoft that we have an enormous opportunity to help and really give a leg up to those startups who really need the help. So we're going to go back to our main kind of broader discussion, and to sort of flip the conversation a little bit, I'm going to talk about a couple of startups that I've seen recently or have been friends with for some time, who I get really excited about the power or the potential of their solutions. And then I'm going to hand over to Shalu to kind of who are her couple of favorite startups as well. So Shalu, get ready to throw out some thoughts and ideas on who you think are great ones to watch. So my couple, I'll give you. In fact, I'll start off with communities out there that I know are doing great work in this space that perhaps might be of use if you are looking to find perhaps your broader community of people that you want to connect with. Backstage Capital do some fabulous work in investing in underrepresented founders. They're predominantly based in the US, but they do have a program in London, so check them out. They're founded by a fabulous woman called Alan Hamilton, who was at one point pitching all across the valley for funding, and she was almost she was living out of her car by that stage because she'd just run out of cash and no one would consider investing in her. So she decided to be part of the solution and set up her own fund to invest in underrepresented founders. So they're a great resource to go look for. The Female Founders Alliance does fabulous work on supporting women who are building solutions and building great companies. Over here in Australia, we have a great program called Remarkable, which supports founders who are building technology that helps people with building technology that is solving problems that people with disabilities face. And then the other program that's worth looking into for female founders as well, particularly if you're looking for funding, is SheEO. Great program that helps to fund women-led businesses, and live in, I think, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the UK and the US. But to my couple of startups that I would love to flag and give some shout out to. The first is another Australian startup called Indigital. It's led by an incredible Indigenous entrepreneur called Michaela Jade. And what she's done is she's built an augmented reality application that brings Indigenous artwork, culture and language to life. And the reason why that's important is we have Indigenous cultures all around the world with such rich histories and incredible knowledge that is genuinely being lost. And it's lost because Indigenous culture typically is passed down from one generation to the next in spoken form. It's rarely written down. And what that means is we're losing, thousands of years old languages. We're losing huge amounts of just hundreds of year old information that could be important or is useful on managing land or the ecosystems around us. So take a look at InDigital. It's doing incredible work and actually just got some funding from the CEO program I just mentioned as well, which is fabulous. Then the other one is a program in South Africa. They're called Broadreach Technology. And what they're doing is using basically data and pulling together all of the data across health services in Africa to help solve HIV. And incredible piece of technology that actually just started off. The founder of the company is called Ernest Darko, and he is a trained doctor. He studied medicine at, I think it was Harvard, certainly at one of the great programs over in the US. And instead of becoming a serving or practicing doctor, he decided to try and look at the systemic issues within healthcare instead. And a lot of that is around streamlining processes, making sure that the right person is in the right room at the right time, and also just looking at the data and figuring out where the biggest gaps in business models are. And that's the solution that he and Broadreach Technology have built. And they have saved over 1 million lives now in South Africa alone on eradicating HIV. So super impressive technologies, really, really great people who are very passionately driven around wanting to solve those problems too. So Shalu, any startups you wanted to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, Annie, great choices. I loved hearing about all of them and some really impressive stories out there. Thank you for sharing that. So I've got a couple on my radar. The first one is a startup called Omniverse. It's a female founder business right here based in San Francisco. She's got a very interesting story. Her name is Dr. Catherine Clayton. She's a CEO and founder. And her personal story is published out there. So with no privacy there, I will share that she was actually born in the US, but was raised in developing countries, and she lost 5 family members to cholera, which is one of the deadliest diseases in the world. It's actually more deadlier than COVID right now. And so she grew up to be a practitioner, a medical practitioner, and then she went on to do her PhD in medicine. She was actually practicing medicine. She was a doctor for a few years until she realized, and she was telling me this the other day, that she got this calling that she was just in the wrong business. She quit her medical practice and she started a startup of her own. And what she's building right now is basically it's through your mobile app. You can actually predict whether there is going to be an outbreak of cholera within a community, and it's via an IoT sensor. So cholera pretty much spreads either through air or water. And so if you could just drop a few droplets of water on that sensor, within 30 minutes, she can predict what the pathogen level in air or water is and what are the likelihood of cholera breaking out in that community. 30 minutes may sound a long time, trust me, in this times that we are in, but it's 240x times faster than gold standard that's out there. And so I've been totally fascinated by what she's doing. She's actually right now building testing kits for COVID as well. And her big ambitions are in the next 3 to 5 years, she want to build a solution to eradicate malaria and polio, which is another subset of deadliest diseases that we have. So I'm a big fan of hers, and in every possible way that I can help her, I'm always next to her. I'm like, Dr. Clayton, let's do something. What can I do for you? How can I help you in your cause? Because she's doing such phenomenal stuff there. The second founder that I'm extremely, or I would say I'm in a fan club of, is actually one based from Sydney. That's a startup called Seaben. And what they're doing is they have these sensors that are spread across the ocean, which gives them data points as to where in the ocean is maximum concentration of non-friendly ocean objects. So think of cigarette butts, think of trash, think of plastic. So these sensors basically give them a geo-mapping of the ocean, so that they can predict, or rather locate specifically where the trash is and go and clean. So it's a massive undertaking they have taken in the clean tech space and sustainability. I'm a huge fan, and I see those numbers and I'm like, gosh, I mean, you guys are doing some awesome stuff. The third one, Annie, that I want to share is a social entrepreneur actually based out of South Africa, Kenya. And I got to tell you, she's one of the boldest women I've met. So when she was 17 years old, right now I think she's like 22, 23, she basically said, I don't see girls anywhere in like data science, AI. Why is that? Why is it so male dominated community? And so she went out and she built a startup of her own at the age of 18. And the startup is called Zindi. And she just said, hey, you know, what do I need? Like, she made some phone calls. She said, I did some LinkedIn cold calls. I just connected with people. I asked them random questions. I built my business plan. And right now what she has is she's building an online platform for data scientists to coach them on AI and machine learning. And she's actually connected with the who's who in that space, and you know, she's getting phenomenal coaching from her network. And going back to community, that's exactly what the community angle is. And she's completely bootstrapped. Her revenue is skyrocketing at this time, at least during COVID times, because what she's doing is she's bringing her community together on this platform and actually coaching them digital skills around artificial intelligence, machine learning. She was sharing with me the other day that, hey, I really want to go big and I want to think about deep tech, which is super hot right now. And so I am just a fan of these three, and I just wanted to share their stories with you.
Great, thanks, Shalu. And we're going to go into Q&A, and we're going to pass over to the Reactor team who are going to run through some of the other events going on around their community soon. But before we do, what words of advice do you have, Shalu, for folks on the live stream? What pieces of wisdom do you have to share with anybody out there who perhaps is considering building a social enterprise or is in the process of doing that and needs some help?
Yeah, so I'm going to get a little greedy here, Annie, and I'm going to give 3 pieces of advice. Pick and choose whichever works. First one is never ever be afraid of failure. Never call it a doomsday and go back home with a sad face. It's the path to success, right? So no matter how many doors shut on you, there's that one door that'll open on you. So keep finding that door that'll open on you. That's number one. Number two is if you're building a solution, it's coming from somewhere. It's your baby. Believe in your conviction. Believe in it. There will be someone, or there is someone out there who will believe in you at some point, right? And so keep that going. And then number 3 is just train your brain muscle to pay it forward. Always, always, no matter where you are in your journey, look back and see how far you have come. And then always pay that wisdom or any help that you can do, pay it forward to someone else. So with that, Annie, I'm going to ask you the same question back. What are your words of wisdom?
I love that last one. You know, of always paying it forward. It's something that's very close to my own personal kind of passions as well. But a friend of mine here in Australia, she talks, you know, the old analogy of, hey, you know, as you're going up the ladder, don't forget to kind of put the ladder back down to bring somebody else up. Yeah. She's like, I want to switch that analogy to don't just put the ladder back down, throw down a net, grab as many people as you can and bring them up with you. And I love that because it shouldn't just be about, you know, it's one baton that I'm passing over to the next person, and they can, you know, it's not a one-on-one thing. This is a one-to-many. We're in a scenario now where we have all of the tools and all of the technology in front of us to be able to share our knowledge. So just consider it to be casting the net backwards rather than just helping one person. So great point for you to finish on there, Shalu. I think for me, the other one is never be afraid to ask for help. You'll be so surprised at how many people I've stalked on Twitter or found a connection through via the second or third connection on LinkedIn and just gone, hey, I'd really like to speak to this person here because I know they can help me on whether it's product market fit, whether it's just on how did they open that particular door that helped them. And just you'll be really, really surprised at how even the super successful founders out there who have got all of the, the glittering credentials, everybody wants to help. They just want you to be specific in what you need the help on. So never be afraid to ask for help, but make sure that when you do get that little moment to ask for it, that you make it as specific as possible. So don't just say, hey, I'd love to grab 15 minutes and have a coffee with you. It's like, no. What do you need? Do you need a connection? Do you need some help with a technology? Just be as really specific and pointed as you can. And then the other one really is the fear of failure part is such a limiting kind of behavior for us as human beings. And the part that you find is you just get better at it each time you take a risk. So the hardest step to take is the very first one. But be brave, take that leap of faith, and you'll figure out that it actually isn't as scary as you thought. And that each step forward you take, it helps you figure out what the next step is after that. So don't be afraid to take the first step in the first place. And also don't be too worried if you don't have a full plan in place either, because I grew up in the UK and did a program basically which was part of the volunteer army. And we used to have a phrase which was, no plan ever survives contact with the enemy. And it's the same in business, it's the same in life. You could write the most incredible 5-year business plan for your social enterprise, but the truth is you only really learn by taking that one step at a time and getting out there and getting the feedback and making the mistakes and learning from it. So just take the leap of faith, and once you've started, it just gets much, much easier each time. All right, I'm going to hand over to Nadia, who is going to give us a quick run through of events on the reactor. Whilst she's doing that, though, if there are any other questions you want to put into the Q&A, please do, and we will be back shortly to go through that Q&A.
Thank you for that, Annie. So next week at the Reactor, I just wanted to take you through a few of the events that we have. We're starting off on the 28th of April at 9 o'clock. We've got a session on ML Ops using GitHub Actions. So this session is going to review machine learning fundamentals and how they're realized using DevOps processes. So that will be led by our US team. Following that session, we've also got the Angular for Beginners Part 1. So this is a 2-hour workshop, so from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's a good session for a solid beginner or an intermediate Angular developer who wants to elevate and get to that next level. We also have another session on the 30th of April at 6 p.m. called Data Science and AI in the 2020s. Why do it and what's in it for you? We'll be talking about a new field called Applied Machine Learning, explain what it is and how AML can be set up and applied within your organization. So these are a couple of sessions that we have next week. We're constantly updating our Reactor Meetup page. So if you do want to see all the other events that we have, just go to Microsoft Reactor Sydney on meetup.com. You can also follow our Twitter page, which is Microsoft Reactor. You'll be able to see the local content as well as global as well. And so that's what we've got going on. Keep an eye out. We're always updating. And I will now hand back over to Annie and Shalu to go through your Q&A.
Great, thanks Nadia. Some really interesting events coming up there, especially that AI/ML one. That's cool. There's going to be some cool stuff there, I'm sure. All right, so to the Q&A, we have a couple of a question and a comment from Tim Prosser. Hi, Tim. So the question is, COVID-19 is showing up some huge inequalities in the world, many of which could be supported through technology. What do we think needs to change or pivot to make progress on this sort of big old to-do list that we now have given our COVID-19 experience? So Shalu, I'm gonna throw the first part of that one over to you in terms of because I know you mentioned a couple of startups, particularly in this space already, but are there any other startups that you've seen that are doing work in the COVID-19 space?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Tim. Thank you for that. And thank you for being such an active participant. I see all the questions, most of them coming from you. So thank you for that. So look, I mean, one of the things among many that COVID has taught us is that technology is the strongest enabler, right, in our community, society, even in our healthcare. And most of the data that's coming out right now clearly shows that we have tons of potential in the healthcare space to leverage technology, and we haven't even done much. So I'm going to pull out an example of a startup that's actually building a solution in healthcare space. What they're doing is they're actually building a kit, and I'm sorry, they're in the stealth mode, so I will not be able to share their name right now, but they're basically building, think of it as if you're going through airport security. You know, they have that wireframe where you just walk through and you get a body scan. So what they're doing is they're really zeroing in on the chest x-ray. They call it chest x-ray right now, but as soon as you pass through that machine, they're claiming to have 90% accuracy around whether you're a potential candidate for COVID or any other respiratory damage. And so that is a huge step. In fact, they're based out of here in the Valley, and I'm working with them closely just to understand, like, how can we help them from technology perspective and getting our healthcare teams engaged as well. But I think, you know, that's one aspect. The other one that I quickly want to share when it comes to technology is, you know, in this world of COVID, we naturally get gravitated towards healthcare because obviously it's a health issue. And we tend to think, gosh, you know, what are some of the emerging technologies that are coming in the healthcare space? But let's not forget, very soon we will be in the post-COVID world, hopefully very, very soon. And our world is going to be a different place. It's going to change us as humans. It's going to change the economy and the customers and the partners and everybody who we interact with. And so there's a very interesting startup that I work with. They're called Throughput. What they're doing is basically they're building a solution in supply chain. So think of all the grocery shelves that are stacked up today, and they get empty by Friday, but they're stacked back again by Monday. And the reason is because we have enough back-end inventory. At some point, that's going to go away, you know, if this continues for a long time. And what they're building is an AI machine learning algorithm in predicting which markets are most vulnerable for supply chain in terms of high demand but low supply. So they're doing some really cool stuff there relating to AI, and they're purely focused on COVID right now to accelerate their business model. Back to you, Annie.
And great flags there. Thank you, Shalu. And I was just going to sort of pick up on one of your other statements of the new normal that we're going to go towards. We're not going to go back to what we used to have. Post-COVID is going to be a different world. I think we can all probably kind of agree that things like working from home and accepting that we can do an awful lot of our work remotely is perhaps going to be something that a lot of businesses are going to sort of embrace a little more. Are there any other things that you think are going to be sort of specific changes that you think will happen?
Yeah, I think supply chain is one. I think our education system is going to drastically change.
That's true.
Like, kids are now enjoying the online, like I have kids and they love online schooling. My 9-year-old tells me, I love this because I get done with my homework by noon. Like, who wants to go back to school and stay there till 3 o'clock, right? And they're loving the online interaction. He still gets to see his friends. He's still doing his homework. He's still progressing, right? But we really need to take a hard look at our education system and either take that bold step of getting everything or at least a portion of it online. And of course, there's a social element that will be missing and hopefully will continue that. But I think it opens up huge opportunities for kids who do not have access to education. And now finally, somebody somewhere will give digital online schooling some serious thought. Mm-hmm. And so that industry, I think, is prone for disruption post-COVID. The other one, Annie, that we are seeing in a big way in terms of startups is retail e-commerce. So at least some of the numbers that I've seen in the US, at least, is post-COVID, most of the brick and mortar shops in retail may just close down because they're getting their revenue through e-commerce, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see how that market picks up, which sort of went downhill a few years ago, but it's picking up back again.
All right, I'm going to move on to another question from Omar, because it's in a space that I have a specific passion about around accessibility. And I love the way that you phrased the question as well, Omar, to sort of flag that you don't necessarily want to just create a solution that serves people with accessibility needs. You want it to be the DNA of your company, and I think that's fantastic, and that's absolutely the right way to go about it. There's something called universal design, right? We all know, I'm sure, and effectively what it means is if you're solving a problem for a very targeted audience, it's more than likely, obviously you need to solve that problem for that target audience, but that solution is still perhaps going to be useful and might serve a much broader audience. So a great example for me is closed captions. It was built for people who are hard of hearing or struggle with the neurodiversity angle of listening and watching something at the same time. And of course, closed captions is a fantastic way for every single one of us to consume video content. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm out and about and perhaps commuting on my way into work, or I used to when I was commuting on my way into work, I'd always watch a video now with the closed captions because it's a great way of internalizing and grabbing on board that information. Another great example from a Microsoft broader family is our gaming console. So we've developed a gaming console so that people who have difficulty with perhaps using a standard gaming control, they can now add in their own elements and personalize it so that it's accessible for anybody. So I think and what we found is that by giving that solution to the folks that needed it, it's also very handy for other people who might have arthritis, for example. So it's not necessarily a visible accessibility issue. So, Omar, great question. And in terms of how to then focus how you're going to build that true influence and decision-making power, so you avoid the feel-good factor and you actually do sort of end up really trying to solve. So those are my two examples of solutions that I think have done a great job of keeping accessibility as their core DNA, but actually being something that helps everybody. Any things that come to mind for you, Shalu, on that one?
No, I think you covered it all. I think accessibility is something that in the previous years, we haven't given much focus and attention to as a community, as a society, even for that matter. But times are changing, and there are some really cool partners and startups out there who are pushing the envelope in the accessibility space. So it's awesome stuff. Good stuff.
Good. All right, I think we are going to wrap those Q&As just there. So we're just going to flash up the final slide, which is the couple of links to apply for the Startup Social Enterprise Program if you're interested. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on this chat and for being so engaged on the Q&A as well. It's been great to speak to you and to share our knowledge with all of you. And you can follow or find us on LinkedIn or Twitter or any of the other socials if you want to connect further after this. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day and stay safe.
Thank you.